Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the a Python hackathon. Let's get started. So this is a four-session Python challenge which I will be teaching you the basics of Python in the first three sessions, and then the fourth session will be you guys competing against each other in order to create a program. There will also be prizes for those who place on the podium. So let's start the session. And before I tell you about myself and the organization, I would like to get you guys started on creating an account on Replit where we'll be coding for this session. So I'll share my screen and I'll guide you guys through how to do that. Replit is an online program that we will use in order to code everything that we do in this session. And I'll put the link to this in the chat. And one second. And then you guys can create an account while I tell you a little bit more about myself and our organization. So I already have an account, so I'm just gonna sign in, but you guys can make your own account and then we'll get started. Um, so, so my name is Shobit Gupta and I am currently a senior in high school. I attend high school in Pennsylvania. And I also got second place in Lockheed Martin's CyberQuest competition, which was a competition for cybersecurity. And I work with the organization Sky is the Limit, which is a nonprofit organization whose goal is to break down barriers and enable equity in STEM education. We strive to create an environment where students can explore their passion and create and reach for the sky. Sky is the Limit organizes programs year long, and some of these programs are robotics and science camps, STEM books and puzzles, online tutorials and tutoring, and hackathons just like this one, and many others. I'll send a link to this our website in the chat. So I'll wait for a couple more minutes for you guys to create an account. But once you guys create an account, you guys can create a REPL and select your language. So there's many different ones, but for this session, we'll be using Python. And you can name whatever you want. So I'll just name it first session, but you guys can do whatever name you want. And I'll load you guys to a coding page like this. So today's session will be just a little bit of basics on Python, on like how to print like basic stuff and like do basic math operations and everything. And then we'll get to other stuff in the next sessions. So if you guys want, you guys could give like a thumbs up in the chat if you guys are ready to move on. And feel free to put any questions in the chat and I'll answer that as soon as I can. Okay, well, let's move on. And so the first thing I'm going to teach you about Python is like the most basic statement, which is a print statement. So a general rule of coding is whenever you start a new language, you guys need to, usually generally everyone always prints like the hello world statement, which is kind of like the tradition in coding. So that's what we will do. So in Python, in order to print anything, you just type in print and then with parentheses, and anything that goes as like a string is like anything that's like a letter or a character. You have to put it inside like quotations, so like that. And if you run that, it will print out hello world. So You can change that to anything. So let me just print another one of these. And I can say like, my name is Shobik. And if I print that, then I'll print my name is Shobik. And then you can also print out numbers, variables, different characters. You can, many different things, right? So if you want to print out numbers, you can do print parentheses, and you can type whatever number you want. So like this time you don't have to put quotations. So if we say 12, and it'll print out 12. So Python, just so there's like usually there's 4 types of expressions in Python. It's called a Boolean, which is your true and false. So if you want to run true, you would type in capital T and then true. And then if you run that, oh, I didn't put a parentheses, but it'll print out true. So you there's booleans, there's int, which is integers, so numbers, and there's float, anything with like a decimal point, or if you're dividing it, it's a fraction that would consider as like a float. Or there's a string. String is like any letter or character that is not a number or like true or false. So that's the basics on Python on how to print anything and like that. So do you guys have any questions about that? Yes. I know you guys can't like talk or unmute, but you can type in like your questions in the chat. And then yeah, I'll give you guys like a couple minutes to try this on your own also if you want to. So the question is how to quote in a quote. Okay, so that's a good question. So what happens is that Python, since you have to put everything in quote, so let's say if I want to like quote like this, so this becomes invalid because this one would close with this one, and then it kind of like highlights it, which is kind of neat. And then so this one becomes like an invalid operation. So what happens is that in Python, you could use like this backslash, which basically stands for like you have to negate something, or it like counts that as a string instead of like, you know, like a syntax or like a quotation. So if I do this, now this one corresponds to like the one in the start, and then the backhand slash makes this into a string. So when I print that, it prints the quotation mark. The other time what you can use is that in Python, you don't always have to use double quotes in order to make strings. So I can replace this with single quotes. And then let's say if I want to put double quotes and then say like, I want to quote something, right? So I can say like, this is a quote, and then we can do end of quotes right here. And then when I print that, then it prints this quote because we're using single quotes as our syntax for a print statement. Or you could use like the backend slash. Any other questions? Okay, well, let's move on to like a little bit more stuff. So let's do some basic additions and stuff. So like math operations. So in Python, you could do addition, multiplication, division, and subtractions all within like the print statement, which are like pretty much the basics. So in order to do the basics, you would do, so let's say like print, like we want to do addition of like 2 plus 3, right? So we would do print, and then we could do 1 plus 2, and then we print that out. It would print 3. So like that, in order to add, you put the plus sign. Now let's do subtraction. So we can do 2 and then subtraction, so minus, and then 1. will print out 1. And in multiplication, we would do asterisk. So we could do asterisk, and then let's make this like a 4. And then division would be the divide or slash, and then this would give you a number. So let's just make it an even number for now. And then when you run that, it would do the operations and it would print like a 2.0 because it's a float and you're dividing. And then there's an 8, 1, and then like 3 addition and all that. So you could do this, or you can create like variables, right? So variables are, let's see, variables are basically like, it stores a value or like an input that you want to do. So let's say like many times, like you're solving some code and you have to like, you calculate a value and you have to store it somewhere so you can use it later in the program. So you can create variables for that. So variables would be to say, let's say we do x equals. So in order to declare a variable, you just type out whatever variable has to be. The only rule is that it cannot start with a number or with like a special character, like an underscore or like a @ symbol. That won't work. So you have to start with a lower or capital letter. It doesn't matter, but it has to be like a letter. And then you could do like X, and then you could put like a number, any number. So we'll just do X, and then equals means like you're assigning it a value. And then you would do like whatever you want to type. So we can say like X equals to 2 plus 5, or 2 plus 5, right? So we know that's 7. But if we want to print that out, we can just print that out when we say print, and then we could say X. So now we want to print out the value of X. So when we run this, it prints out the value of X as 7. Do you guys have any questions on that? No? Okay. Well, that's like the basics of Python, where you can do like simple addition, subtractions, math operations, then print out anything you want, and then the variables, right? So now we can also make the variables into strings. So let's say we can make name as a string. So we could say name is this, then we put a string. So my name would be Shilbert, right? Now this is like a little bit more complex on how you could like include many different things all together and like put it as one. So let's say I want to say this statement right here, right? My name is Shobit, in a different way. So I could run it like this on the top on line 3, where it's just my name is Shobit, or I can use my name variable. So name variable, what I would do is I could say my name is, which is like our statement, and then plus to show like I want to add something else, but there's going to be a variable since it's not in quotations. And then I could say name, the name of my variable. And when I run that, it prints my name as Shobit, where it adds this with this. Now there's a little bit of rules with this when it comes to numbers. So one rule in Python is that you can only print out string value in as a print statement, which means you can only print out like characters, right? So numbers aren't characters, but if you put it in quotation, they can be characters. So let's say if I do this, right? And then I put like a 23 in front of my name. So now when it prints this 23 out, this is not a number, but it's a string. So let's say numbers. So you can like think of this as numbers can be, calculated. So like, let's say you have a 23 right here, right? Or like X, for example. Now X equals to 7. But when you print this out, it's becoming into a string. But over here, you can like do additions and like and division, whatever you want operations. So now let's say I want to say my name, let's change this into, let's say like this. So print, and then the number x is, and then let's say you want to print out the value of x. So let's say you just add an x, right? Now, when you run it, it's going to give you an error, which is going to say that it's not a string. So what this means is that because x over here is a number, not a string, you would have to change this over here into a string. That's like the rule of Python, where anytime you print something, it has to be a string. So in order to change it into a string, what you would do is str, and you would put x in brackets. So str stands for like change this into string. And then you would say like, what do you want to change into string inside the parentheses? So when you run this, it prints x is 7, changes the number 7 into string 7. So now you can't do any operations with string in this statement, but now you can do like changes over here. So you can select x equals to 7 plus 5, then you can print out the same thing, and it would make those changes and print out 12. So same thing where x is like a number. So we can say like x is 7.5 plus 5. Now what happens is it's 12.5. So 7.5 is a value of a float because it has a decimal, but 5 is an integer. So what Python does is it calculates it by itself. It's built into the program where it thinks, okay, it's a number. So it'll like automatically characterize it as a float instead of an integer, and it'll adjust its algorithms to like print out the correct value. All you have to like keep in mind is you can write everything into string before you print it out. Is there any questions on that? Okay, well, so since like I've been like I taught you like all of like the basics and like how to print this, why don't you guys take, let's say, 7 minutes, and why don't you guys try to print out yourself and print out your name, what is your age, and print out like 3 things you would like to do in your free time, so you guys can get like a little bit of practice on how to code and like use Python. And let me know if you guys have questions. And yeah, let's take about 5 minutes. So I'll teach more stuff at 1:23 EST or 10:18 PST. Okay. So did everyone try creating like something in Python with like printing out basic steps of Python? And like, do you guys have any questions about it? No questions? Okay. So let's move on. So we're gonna stick to the basics of Python today, but we can introduce like a little bit more stuff. So let's say, let's take, I'm gonna delete all of this and let's take this for example, right? It says my name is Shobit and then 23. Let's say if you wanna, you know how there's like a single space here and it prints out single space. So in Python, let's say, think about you want to do, you want to print out like a list, right? So you want to print out like a list of like things you want to do today. So like, let's say, things, to, uh, things that I have to do today. And then you could say like, make a list, right? So we could say like, you have to do your homework. I have to do chores. Then there's, let's say I have to clean my room. So what if you print it like this, it's gonna print out in like a long thing, right? Like just a long line. It's not really like neat, or it's not like a format of like a table, let's say. So now if you want to like print this out neatly in like line by line, where you have like homework, then like chores and clean rooms, so you're going like down in a list instead of just printing it all out straight across. So there's two options you could do it. One would be to like make a print statement of like each thing. So you would copy this, then you would say like print, then quotations, put your stuff, and do that for each one, right? So it takes a lot more time. It's a little bit tedious and like a lot of code writing. Or there's like special things you can do in Python that let you like clean up your code within like this one statement, so you don't have to write it again and again. So earlier on, when someone asked about how you print quotes in Python, and I showed them like the backslash, and you can print your quote. So backslash basically like means to like negate whatever, or like convert whatever's in your front of it into a string. So sometimes you have to like, let's print something out in a new line, or like indent it, let's say, right? So there's special characters you could use with this backslash in Python that will help you do your organize your work. So let's say right here we have things I have to do today. So I want to print whatever my list is in a new line every time, right? So I can say slash n, and then I could print out like my thing. So slash n denotes new line. So backslash would like make this n into like a string, but this like Python's side of work instead of like our coding. We just need to know like slash n, and then this would make it into a new line. So whenever we run this, um, oh, I have to do it this way. Oh, this one. There you go. So it creates a new line, right? Now let's say if I want to do like a new line for every one, so I could do like slash n and then slash n, and I can remove the commas since I don't need it. And then it prints out your list in a list, but like not in the same line, but in one thing you have to do in every single line. So it can be like a little bit neat in order to like organize your code within like this line. So instead of having to write like 5 different print statements for each thing we have to do, we can just type everything in here, just add a little bit of formatting, and that would clean up our list. Another thing is, and say if you want to indent this to make it into a list, So that is /t, and you could just print it out like this. So /t would indent your stuff. So if you run that, it indents it, adds spaces over here to like homework. So you can see like this is what I have to do today, and then this would be your list. So we can do this for each one. And then it prints out everything like that. Now, if I want to print something like just print like a random thing, so let's say hi, and then I print that, this goes back to normal because it doesn't have any of these new line indentation or like /t. So this can be like really useful because you don't have to like type everything again and again, and you can like use quotations, so it saves space and saves your time. And it's um, it's useful because many times you have to do certain types. So like backend slash, so you could look at like more stuff backslash can do. This is just like the basics. So it helps you like type stuff out that you might want to like, well, it like lets you like basically organize your text in a better meaning. So you could like, another thing you could do is you could say \\, which means that this backslash basically converts the front backslash into a string. So when you print that, it just prints a backslash if you ever want to print that out. And then there's the quotation marks again, so it concatenates everything. So you could say like backslash like this, and then let's say like it. So then it creates the string into its when we add like this. And then you can concatenate things and make it into apostrophe. So that's the backslash, back T, because that like helps you organize code. Then there is, so as I talked about this earlier on like different types of variables and like categories in Python. So this would be a string, right? This is a string, a number is a float. So how do you know what's like the type of this? So let's say like x equals to 7, right? Now let's say you want to print out like what type this is. So like you want to know whether it's an integer or it's a float or a string. What you could do is you could do in a print statement, you could put your basic command, it's called type, and then in parentheses you can say x. So this will print out the type of this object. So class int. So it says class and like brackets or like in signs, and it says integer. So this means x is an integer. Now if we were to change this to like a 7.0, make it a decimal, becomes a float. And then we can, let's say we can change this into a string, then it becomes a string, or we can make it a Boolean by making it true, and it becomes a Boolean. Now, this is useful because let's say sometimes you're unsure of what exactly the type of this is and like further calculation. So when you get to like a little bit more advanced stuff in Python, sometimes you can never multiply like a number with a string because that'll give you an error, and we can try that out, right? So let's say we can do y, right? Y equals a string 7 times 5, which is an integer. And then if we were to print out y, it's going to give us an error. Oh, never mind, sorry. It's not going to give you an error because, okay, I forgot to tell you guys this, but another thing about Python that is different from many other language is that when you're about to print something, so, okay. So Python is like an intelligent language that is made more for like ease of humans to code instead of like machine understanding. So like any language, basically the essential purpose of any coding language is where a human can type code, then the machine, like the code language, converts that code into binary, so like the ones and zeros that the computer understands, and then runs that through the computer for execution. So Python is like a human-friendly language where it's made to for like the ease of humans to type. So Python has like many things that are like embedded into Python that makes like our life as coders a lot easier and like makes it easy to like print stuff. So one thing Python has is that if you're ever to multiply anything like a string, it basically multiplies itself as in like 7 times 5 is 35. But this kind of like multiplies the string by 7. So like it basically means like print 7 out 5 times. So like when you print this out, it would print out 7 5 times. So that's what it like is trying to do here. Where it would show you an error is if you were to say like 7 plus 5, and then if you run it, it won't run because this is not it's not a variable, and you're basically like trying to add um a string with like a integer. So say like you didn't make this into this. So now let's say if we were to do this, right? What do you guys think it would print out? You guys can type that in the chat if you would like to. So like what would 7 plus 5 as string print out if we run this? Okay. Okay, now let's run this. So when we run this, right, it prints out 75, not 12, which would be 7 plus 5 would be 12. So this is because there's two strings, right? So when you have a string, you can't perform like any math operations. So this would be like what we did in previous example, where we were like, let's say we had x as 7, right? And then we were to do like the number is, and then we were printing out x, and it was showing us an error where we cannot do it because x not a string. So we had to convert x into a string, and then it would print out 7. So number 7. So same thing's happening over here where it's just like two strings because strings cannot be added with each other. It's a character, not an integer. It just joins them both together and just prints out 75. Now, if we were to do the same thing, so without quotation, it would become into integers and it would print out 12. Any questions on that? Okay, well, let's move on to next thing. So next thing is to change the type of something, right? So let's say you have x as 7, which is an integer. So we can do like print type, look at what x is. So when it says like it's an integer, let's say if we want to like create this into a float, so we could do like print. And then if we want to like change the type of something, what we can do is that we can just type in like float, and then we can put x in the thing. So what this does is it changes x as a float. Float is a decimal. So when we print x now, it's going to print, it's still going to print 7, but we can put type here of x. And because we created this into a float, what is that? 1 second. Okay, let's try it this way. Yeah, so we were printing out the type, and then we create this into a float, and now it's a float. So float would be like a decimal point. So you could change things like this. So let's say if we were to do 7.0, so now this is a float, and we run this becomes a float, right? Now we can change this into integer, so it doesn't print out the decimal, and that would be an integer. So this is helpful when you do like expressions and like division. So we can do like number equals, we can do let's say 7 divided by 5, right? So when you do 7 divided by 5 and you print that, you get 2.1.4. Now, let's say you were coding and you didn't want this 1.4 and you wanted to just to print out 1 and you wanted to print out a whole number. So if you were to convert this into int, and then you could say like int number, what it does is that it concatenates it and it makes it into 1. So the rounding rule works over here, where if anything's like above 0.5, it would round it up, or if it's below 0.5, it would round it down. So since it was 1.4, it rounds it down to like 1. And then this could be helpful in like, let's say example would be like, you were to like divide cookies with amongst like your friends, and you wanted to like, you have 7 cookies, you have 5 friends, you wanted to divide like equally. So you're not gonna like divide a cookie into like 5 pieces and gives it to your friend. You would just give 1 cookie to each person, and then you're gonna have like the 0.4 as remaining. That would be like kind of your amount. So you would just take that and you would say like, oh, you would give 1 cookie to each person. So that like, that would be like helpful when you round it down. Any questions on that? Okay, so let's try that out. And why don't you guys try printing out, let's say you have 10 marbles and you want to give that, you want to divide the 10 marbles with your friends equally, and you have 8 friends, and you want to like know how many marbles you can give to each friend and not have like any remaining leftovers. So it prints out like an integer like that. Try printing that out. And I'll give you guys 5 minutes for that. Okay, well, do you guys have any questions on that? You can type that in the chat. Um, any questions I can answer about what we have done so far about changing types or like concatenating, changing like types and printing out types of like integers? Any questions? No? Okay. Well, let's move on to a little bit more. Let's try to create like a small piece of code now. So I'm just gonna clear everything out and I'll show you guys how like everything I taught today and how we can like all put all of that together into like let's say into like a small piece of code, right? So for example, I asked you guys right now to like code where you have 10 marbles and you have 8 friends and like divide the marbles equally with against each other. So let's do the same thing and I'll show you guys like how I would code it and like how concatenating and like changing types can be helpful. So before I get to that, let's do this, right? Actually, no. So yeah, let's do that. So this time, let's say I have 20 cookies that I want to divide with 6 people. So you could say that as we could say x equals 20, and then we could say, actually, we can do this. We can like put names of variables, and then we could do friends equals 6. So this means cookies, the variable is cookies, and it has a value of 20. There's friends, and then the value of that is 6. And then you can do, let's say, number of cookies. And okay, yeah, one more thing I didn't tell you guys is that whenever you're making a variable, you cannot have any spaces in the middle. So you because so you have to keep it in like one variable. So you could do like this number of cookies, and then a general rule of coding is that after the first letter or like first word, every first letter of every other word becomes capital. Just looks neat. Or you could do underscore. So we can do, in order to make it like a little bit shorter, we can say num cookies. And then we can do cookies divided by friends. So that would be like how many cookies each friend gets. And then we can print each friend gets. And then we could do outside, we could do num cookies. And now remember that because we're printing out a value that we calculated over here, we would have to convert this into a string. And we put this into a string to convert it. And when we run this, it prints out each friend gets 3.335. So like that's a decimal, right? We don't want these decimals because we want like a round value. So now there's 2 ways we could change it. One way is that, so what Python right here does is that when you divide any integer by any integer and there's a remainder, Python automatically makes this into a float. And then when you highlight it like right here, it kind of tells you it's a float, or you can like check by saying print type and then num cookies. And when you print that, it tells you it's a float. So there's many different ways you can change that into a string. One is that you can do you can change the variable type right here. So you can say like this is an integer, and I want to do num cookies. You run that, and it doesn't work because Oh, okay. So I was wrong. You can't really do this, but you can do this. So what this would do is it creates integer, this into integer, and then when you divide that by friends, wait, I'm not sure what's going on here. You could do this. 1 second. That's weird. Uh, okay, yeah, you can do it this way. So you put string and you put integer. So what this means is it's like it gets a little complicated with all the brackets and like string and all that, but it basically says like convert this into string, whatever's in the thing. So and then it's integer. So that means convert whatever's in this bracket into integer. So what this is doing step by step is that it's taking number of cookies, it's getting the value, which is like 3.333. It's converting that into int, so it's rounding it down to a 3, then converting that into a string, so you can print it in a print line because you have a string over here. Then it says each friend gets 3 cookies. So that's one way, right? Now you could also do it another way, which is modulus. So modulus is basically the character percent sign. So what this means is that it prints out the remainder of whatever you get. So if we were to print out, let's say 20 mod 6, it prints out 2. 2 is like the remainder you get when you divide 20 by 6. So like 6 goes into 23 times, you get 18. 20 minus 18 is 2. So it prints out the 2, that is the integer, the remainder, right? This could be helpful when, say, you're doing this equation right here, where it's like each friend gets 3 cookies and you can calculate how much cookies there's left over. So you could say print and then this, and there you can say um, there are, and then you could do, we can say create a variable, right? And then we can say leftover equals, and then we could do 20 mod 6, and then we could say string leftover, and then say leftover cookies. Now, when we print this out, it shows this. So it's like showing, well, let's make this a little bit more neater. So it's right here. So it shows each friend gets 3 cookies where there are two, there are 2 cookies left. So I forgot to write that. So each friend gets 3 cookies. There are 2 cookies left. And yeah, so that's like the basic statement. So over here, like, converting this into integer is helpful because you don't want to say like each friend gets 3.55 cookies because that's kind of like tedious and like it's not correct because you're not going to give like pieces of a cookie to a friend. You would just give them like a whole cookie. And then you can see over here, like, okay, so now I have this many cookies left. Any questions on that? Okay, well, why don't you guys try this again with a different example? Let's say, let's do a little bit more complex one. So I will say, let's do this. I'll print this out for you, and then this would be your exercise. So why don't you guys take time and we can say there are 300 students that are going on a trip. There are 5 buses which can each take 10 students. How many students can go on the trip and how many cannot? So why don't you guys take five, let's say like take 10 minutes and code, um, try to solve this. And you could use the above example over here for reference on how to do this code. And yeah, take 10 minutes. Okay. So does anyone have any questions? So I will go over how to solve this, but I will wait like one more minute in case anyone has questions before I go over how to solve this. Okay, let's start it. So I'm just gonna clear all of this behind. So now this is our question, right? So we could start this by saying, so students equals 300, which means we have 300 students in a variable. Then we can say bus, right? And then we can say equals 5. So there's 5 buses, and each can take 10 students. So we would do, let's say, um, total students can take. So let's say we got to find out how many students we can take, right? So the way we could do this is we can say students equals, and then we can just do, there's 5 students and then 10 buses. So we could do 5 times 10, and that would print out how many students we can take. And then left would be, we can say students. Wait 1 second. I made these two the same. So that we can say can go. So students that can go, and then students left. So this would be that, and then we can say students minus can go, which means, and then how many of the students there are minus how many can go would be the students that would be left. And then when we print this out, we can do students that can go on the trip are, and then we would do plus, then convert into string, of course, because we cannot have anything other than string printout in, as a print statement. And then we would do students that can, and then can go plus period, and then um, there are, and then string left students. So when we print this, so print this out, we get right here. Hold on, I'll make this a little bit neat. So we would do create a little line. So students that can go on the trip are 50. There are 250 students, sorry, that cannot go on the trip. And yeah, that's how you would create that. So this shows like there are 250 students that cannot go on the trip, and there's 50 students that can go on the trip out of the 300 students. So that's how you would solve that. And for this session, the last thing I will teach you guys is how to comment stuff. So actually, I'm gonna keep the code we had, and let's say, so comment stuff. So commenting in coding basically works as, let's say, like unused code, or like code that's meant to be seen only by the programmer, but isn't like supposed to be seen by like whoever's using it. So like whatever the programmer sees is whatever's on the page over here. So all of this that we have typed, right? What the person using the code sees is this, right? So this is like what's being outputted and what's being printed. This is what's the code behind all of this, right? So let's say we want to like, so with how commenting works is that there's two types of comments. There's one line comment and there's two line comments. So in order to do a one line comment, you would just do this, a hashtag, and then you could say, this is the question. And then when you run this, you see, this part isn't printed in the code, only this is printed. So um, what this symbol does is that it tells the Python, it tells the program to skip over this line because it's a code. It's just a comment, so it's not going to use this into like coding or like calculating anything. It's just a comment. So comments can be useful to like explain something or like what is the purpose of this program in the code, or it could be used to comment out some code. So like let's say we wanted to comment out this, right? Because we're not sure if this would work or not. When we comment that out, you see like the space between the lines gone because Python skips over that. Now, if we remove the comment, the space right here is again because there's no comment. So that's defines one line comment. Two line comments would be denoted with three parentheses or like three quotation marks. So whatever I type in here, so whatever I type here is a comment. And I could make say like hello or hi, right? I print this and it doesn't print out because all of this is commented. So we could say like one useful thing for this would be, let's say, is that there was an error in your code, right? Let's say you make a error of you put can go one. This is not a variable, right? And then when you run this, it gives you an error. So now you're trying to like debug your code, going through, seeing what's wrong. So you can comment like one part of the code out. So let's say we comment this out, right? And we run this. And then, so what happens is that we can do this. We can comment like this and a large code segment, we can comment this out in the code. And then many times what people do, or like what us coders do, is we can print like, okay. So this shows like, okay, the code has been run the whole through. We commented this part out and we're printing okay, which means that the code above this works because it's printing okay where it got to this part of the code. So when you print that, it says okay, right? So the error is somewhere over here. So now let's like, we undo this and then we could do 1, 2, 3. Now because this part has like left over here, so it's gonna show an error. So I'm just gonna remove this for a minute, right? And then we run that, it works and it prints out okay. And if we put this back in, 1 second, it gives you an error. It says name left is not defined. There are string left. So right here, it shows like the print statement and it shows like the left variable isn't defined. So now if we were to remove this from here, we could do that, run, and it says, look, can go isn't defined. So now we know that our code of whatever error is on line 11, and we can see, oh, it's can go 1, but we have can go undefined. So when we remove that, everything works and it prints out. So there's like many different uses of commenting, but main uses of commenting is to specify what the program or like this line of code does, the use of the line of code, and the other could be to like debug your code and like comment out specific pieces of code to see where your code is wrong or like how it works with this stuff or like without that type of code. Any questions on that?
Okay. So since there's no questions, the last thing we're gonna do today, so I'll just show like how this would be. So this is the answer, right? And then we could say comment this, and we could say like these are the basic variables. And we could say, let's do this, and then we could say this is the calculations for the answer. Now, when we run this, it doesn't affect our code, right? And then let's print this, comment this out because we don't need that anymore. So it doesn't interrupt any of our code, but it looks a lot neater. So if let's say a random person were to look at it, they would know like, okay, what is this? So this is the question. What are these supposed to mean? These are the basic variables. So like what you need from here. So like 300 students and then 5 buses. Then these are the calculations for the answers. So this is what you did in order to solve your question. And this is the answer. So this is your print statement. So that's where how comments are used in Python. Last reminder. So this is one line comment. For example, if I do this, write in anything and then something else, right? If I were to print this out, it would be an error because something else is not defined. It's not a comment since it's not in this line. So in order to comment this, I would do this, that, and it comments it out. Or I would have to put this into 3 different quotes or like the multi-line quotes, right? So I would do something like this and then it comments it out. So why don't you guys take 5 minutes and try comment things out yourself in your own code. And let me know if you have any questions. Okay, so does anyone have any questions on comments or anything else that we learned today? None? No questions? I'll wait another minute. Okay, I guess there's no more questions. Then this is all for today's session. So just a reminder of what we went through. So we learned like different types of expressions that are in Python. So string, float, and Boolean. And then we also learned how to do print statements, basic operations. So add, subtract, multiply, divide, modulus, which prints out like the remainder of anything, right? And then we learned how to like print out a type of something. So we know like if it's an integer or if it's a float, we printed out, we did basic questions like this one, where we figured out how many students can go on the trip, how many cannot. We learned out how to define variables, calculate using variables, print those in a statement, convert different things into different to change the type of expressions. So change into a float or like a float to a string, for an example. And then lastly, we learned how to do commenting. So that was today's basics, introduction to Python. And I want to thank you guys for attending the session. And next week, we're going to learn more about Python with how lists are used or dictionaries are used in Python and different types of loops in Python and condition statements, right? And with that all being said, next session is going to be next week on Sunday, 10 p.m. PST or 10 a.m. Sorry, 10 a.m. PST or 1 p.m. EST. And yeah, thank you for attending today's session. And if there's no other questions, that's it. All right. Bye-bye, guys.